All right, we're going to finish the rest of lesson 2 today. Start with the weapons used in World War One. So not only did World War One see the use of trench warfare, but it also saw really your first widespread use of weapons that would be used in modern war, and we've kind of talked about that before. Um, But machine guns, this isn't the first time we've seen a machine gun used in war, but the fact that it's used so widespread and refined, it's going to change the nature of war for for the foreseeable future. Um, these machine guns were capable of firing 600 rounds a minute, and they could inflict heavy casualties on your enemy. Actually, they're responsible for about 90% of Allied casualties in the Battle of the Somme in 1916. Really, the two most innovative weapons during World War I are the tank and the airplane. So together, this brings in the era of mechanized warfare, or warfare that uses gasoline or diesel fuel. And they're both used very effectively. The British are the first to use the tanks effectively by 1917. You could drive large number of tanks through barbed wire defenses. It could clear a path for the infantry. And because the tanks really aren't damaged by machine guns or rifle fire, they could be used to really mark the end of trench warfare itself, because they can just go right through. When the United States enters the war, our air power is pretty weak. We eventually get the funds to build our own Air Force. But the planes that we're building are really flimsy, and really they could only be used for scouting. Later on, they become faster and stronger, and they can carry machine guns. The Germans, they invent a way to make sure that the machine gun fire doesn't end up hitting the propeller. So you could obviously mount machine guns to those, making them better and more effective. So by 1918, the British had built up a strategic bomber force of 22,000 planes, and they're able to hit German weapons factories, which is very strategic for the end of the war. Our ace pilot, who will become a war hero, his name is Eddie Rickenbacker. They're going to be involved in what we call dogfights, because planes are so flimsy, and before they can mount machine guns to them, pilots are just going to have basically like duels in the air. They're armed with pistols, and they just try to shoot one another out of the sky, basically. So, observation balloons are also used pretty extensively, but they become a target of ace pilots because, well, they're big and easy to hit. So, when Russia pulls out of the war in 1917, the German army is going to shift all of their troops to the Western Front, and then they actually do manage to come within 50 miles of Paris, and so the Americans arrive just in time to stop their advance. And several weeks later, they're going to prove to be a huge role in throwing back the German attacks at two major French cities. And we're coming, well, close to the end of the war. One of our American war heroes during World War I his name is Alvin York. And at first he's known as what we call a conscientious objector. It's a person who opposes the war based on moral grounds. But originally, after a while, he comes around and decides that World War I is a just cause. And he and 6 others managed to kill 25 Germans and capture 132 German prisoners in a single battle. And he is eventually promoted to sergeant, and he becomes a U.S. celebrity. And so you have a particular section in your project where you're asked to write about war heroes, and Eddie Rickenbacker and Alvin York are 2 people that you can write about. But you, of course, can look up, people that you can use Google to search other World War I heroes. There are plenty. So by late 1918, the war was crippling the German economy. Many of their civilians are lacking food and supplies, and you're going to see riots break out and strikes break out in Germany, and a revolution is going to sweep across Austria-Hungary. And this makes continuing the war very difficult for the Central Powers. On November 3rd, 1918, Austria-Hungary is going to surrender to the Allies, and then that same day, you have a group of German sailors are going to mutiny against their government, and you have revolutionary councils forming. By November 9th, socialist leaders are in the capital, Berlin. They're going to establish a German republic. The Kaiser is going to step down. And then, although there were really no Allied soldiers on German territory and no really decisive battle, there is going to be an armistice sign, which is basically a truce. So this happens on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. And World War I officially comes to an end. Your final numbers for World War I, it is the bloodiest war in history up to that date. You have more than half of the 22 million dead are civilians, 20 million more are wounded. You have a total of about 10 million refugees seeking asylum in other countries. The direct economic cost is going to be about $338 billion, which we're going to talk about who's going to be responsible for paying that here in the next couple of days. The U.S. manages to lose 48,000 men in battle. That number is going to significantly jump for World War II. We lose about, I think it's like 425,000 in World War II. More than 200,000 Americans are wounded, but across the world, the end of the war is going to bring great relief to everyone. So just because we have kind of brought about the end of the war in our lecture, I still need to talk about what was going on or in the United States during World War I, and we'll kind of wrap that up over the next week when we get back from Thanksgiving break.